There we go. I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see a good turnout of interested citizens in the business of the township. We have no 3-minute delegations. I'll take a motion to adopt the agenda. Sherry and Doug, any discussion? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Any declarations of conflict of pecuniary interest and the nature of that conflict? None declared. The fourth is the minutes of our previous meeting of January 15th. I get a motion to adopt those minutes. Wenda and Wendy, any discussion or business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you. So we have 3 delegations this evening on the same topic: preservation of farmland, zoning considerations, severances from farmland, and so on, which has certainly stimulated the interest of both the public and council. Being a farmer myself, this is something that's concerned me for quite some time, and I'm glad to see that we've got some public involvement in the issue. So we have Andrew Michalski, Ed Embry, and Jacob Ellens in that order. Andrew, are you prepared to start, or did you? Yeah, the floor is yours, Andrew. Just hit that button, and that will turn the mic on. The red light indicates that there may be a button at the back there to turn it on in the first place, Andrew. We're always fussing with these things. Your time's up, Andrew. Sorry. Speaking of time, each delegate has 15 minutes to make your presentation and whatever time it takes after that for council comment and questions. So go ahead, Andrew.
All right, thank you very much, Reeve Wise and council. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Andrew Michalski, and my wife and I have been very concerned about farming, agriculture, and biodiversity. We raise heritage livestock breeds that are in danger of extinction as part of our concern for biodiversity in agriculture. We've raised Lynch lineback cattle in association with RNS Heritage Farm on Bethel Road. My wife and her business partner, Yana Parks, are involved with our Lincoln sheep. They are head of the Little Long Wool Company, where we're selling wool products, fleeces, breeding stock, and weaving products. Next slide. Oh, can I? All right. Oh, okay. Thank you. All right, over there. That's it. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So yes, we are losing food sovereignty. Now, wherever you see that, it's underlined or different color, it's a hyperlink to the source. And it's the primacy of people's and community rights to food and food production. And certainly when we look at food sovereignty, one of the concerns that we certainly became aware of was the food security during the pandemic. And up until the pandemic, we had the average amount of sales for beef and lamb. And when the pandemic started, we were sold out in 2 months. And this was not unusual. Farm gate sales skyrocketed across Ontario. People came to the door. They want products they can count on, that they believe there's some level of transparency. And at least that's what they were telling me. Within the 2 months, we're sold out, and then we're taking a waiting list for the next harvest of beef. So issue is what happens during the next pandemic. And certainly what we're looking at here is making sure that Stone Mills residents, there is at least capacity here for raising food. The sad thing is, despite all of the farmland in Ontario, by 2012, Ontario was already a net importer of food. We lost 319 acres of farmland daily in 2021. That was up from the 175 in 2016. And during that same period, 1,354 Ontario farms disappeared. Next. Oh, skipped one. Yeah. Okay. So first major soil survey of Stone Mills, in fact, back then was obviously Camden and Sheffield townships, was very thorough. When you read that particular report, We're talking about people who not only did the topography in terms of maps, but went out, dug the soils, and found out and named, labeled all these kinds of different soils. The statistics for Stone Mills were kind of impressive, and that's combined with Richmond Township. But between those three townships, there were, can you believe, 75,000 acres of farmland, supporting 21,000, more than 21,000 head of livestock. That, by the way, was the same amount, almost the same amount as South Fredericksburg, which is impressive given the amount of, obviously, fine soil they have down there. This was on the initiative by the federal and Ontario governments. And so then we move on to provincial policy. Yeah. So the Ontario Foodland Guidelines on Planning for Agriculture, 1978, and as well as the policy statements for 2020 state that all types, sizes, and intensities of normal farm practices shall be protected. And of course, as I'm sure you know, the municipal planning authorities, meaning you, shall designate what are prime agricultural areas. So what is prime agricultural soil? Yeah, next one. So looking at the Canada Land Inventory, which has integrated soil data since the 1960s. It's now operated by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. The soils are grouped into 7 classes and 13 subclasses. Now, for the sake of simplicity, we're going to be most surveys and so on refer to the first 7 classes. You'll see letters later on. Those refer to the subclasses. If you have any questions on them, I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, now the thing is the classes are based on the intensity rather than the kinds of their limitations to agriculture. So for example, you could have some very fine clay loam that is extraordinarily wet, at which point it is no longer class 1. It might be considered class 4 or 5. Again, the whole classification is based on the limitations and what they are for growing crops. Next. The top 3 can constitute prime agricultural soil. No significant limitations down to moderately severe limitations. And those are the top 3 that seem to be focused upon. However, the interesting thing is that the original Foodland Guidelines actually referred to the first 4. So soil 4 classification was also included. Okay, so yeah, all those guidelines state the prime agriculture areas shall be protected for long-term use. And the 2 provincial policy statements include specialty crop areas and classes 1, 2, and 3 soils. Specialty crop areas generally refer to the Niagara region where you have a large number of fruit trees in specialty areas. There are, as I understand it, no specialty crop areas in Stone Mills. Provincial Policy Statement of 2020 states that a municipality may authorize non-agricultural use of prime farmland only when alternative locations have been evaluated. And there are no reasonable alternative locations which avoid prime agriculture areas. And there's no reasonable alternative locations with lower priority agricultural lands, which is a fairly, I think, a pretty clear statement. So let's see what the county has said. Next one, please. So the official plan for the county recognizes agriculture as a primary activity of land use, protects all sizes, types again, promotes a diverse, innovative, and economically strong agriculture industry and associated activities. Next. So let's see how well we've done. Well, Loyalist Township, just look as a comparison, has protected more agricultural land than all the other townships combined. The agricultural land, which you see coded in blue there, is from their official plan, and that is, again, protected as agricultural land. Now, most of that is on Amherst Island, most of Amherst Island, I should say, and there's those two large areas in the Western Township. Now, again, they have a lot more land there, I think, in terms of agricultural use, but you have to give them credit for protecting as much as they did. Next. The Stone Mills official plan of 2022 seeks to preserve prime agricultural lands by protecting it from incompatible uses. And again, defines prime agricultural land as specialty crop areas. So 1, 2, and 3 in this order of protection. Next. Now, despite these ambitious goals, Stone Mills only has 2 areas zoned agricultural. That's the dark green in the map near Moscow. The vast majority of the township was zoned rural with, unfortunately, no rationale, no science, and no objective criteria. When you look at the soil map, for example, at the bottom there, for the farm northwest of Moscow, it has class 1 and 2 soils near the Moscow Road, but most of the farm is class 3 and 4, with in fact some 7 there. Next. So how did almost all of Stone Mills become zoned rural? Well, at the, hopefully not repeating this for too many people, decades ago, all the townships had to zone their land, and all of Camden Township was zoned agricultural with no possibility of severances. Farmers wanted to be allowed to sever land for their children to build homes or to sever off non-productive land for profit. Reeve McDonald, and this was back around 1995 or 2000 was when he was Reeve, appointed Councilor Clarence Kennedy, Robert Clancy, planner Glenn Tunnock, and OMAFRA soil expert Ray Velitis to assess the zoning of farmland in Camden Township. The 4 spent 1 day driving around the township to assess the soils, and after an open house with farmers, council voted to rezone all the township as rural, except for the 1 farm near Moscow whose owners wanted the agricultural designation. And there was, of course, the second one, which is on the Huffman Road, which is nearby there, but the same kind of repetition. Okay, next. Now, could the community have possibly foreseen the dramatic increase in property values, the influx of new residents from outside the township, and the threat to farming? Unfortunately, Stone Mills allowed much of its limited prime farmland to be badly fragmented or lost to development, and here are some examples. But again, we really want to focus on the fact that nobody back then could have predicted this surge in demand in farmland that took place over the last few years. Next. Okay, so class 1 soil. This is our best stuff. It's most of the soil belongs in a belt along the Napanee River Valley, running from Strathcona to Curl Road. You see it there. It's color coded in dark gray, and then it's next to class 3, which is at the lower end. You see it running down there towards Napanee. Okay, next. Okay. This severance is the photo above on County Road 1 near Strathcona. It has an executive home fronted by a 10 acre or roughly 4.7 hectare lawn. Provincial planning policies of 1978 and 2015 were not followed. Next. Class 2. This one is on known as the Galbraith Field. If you look at that place, then we'll get the exact location, Galbraith Field, but you see that big swath of brown. That is class 2 soil. It's running all the way across County Road 4 there, from the northwest of the village to the northeast. It connects with the River Valley's class 1 soil to the east and the west, and the class 3 soil to the south. It has become, in what some people in the village refer to now as the township's green belt, going because it extends so far and is so valuable in its soil. Okay, next. Okay, so that's a picture of it, street view. Multiple severances were granted on November 29th, 2023. Provincial policies of 1978, 2015, and 2020 were not followed. Next.
Well, you're down to about 3 minutes, Andrew.
Sorry?
You've got about 3 more minutes.
3 more minutes, okay. Class 3 soil, north shore of the Napanee River, same thing. Okay, and that's just north of Camden East. Next slide, please. So this is Heritage Drive severances. And that was started roughly, actually I saw a couple of from the 1980s, but roughly 1990s when it started to expand. Again, the Foodland guidelines of 1978 were not followed. Okay, so now I'm going to switch gears, go to the next slide. We have 3 letters from the 3 farm organizations who objected to the destruction of the 50-acre parcel of farmland northwest of Kamnice, the Galbraith Field. Now they believe in the supporting the preservation of all farmland, that is, all 7 classes. Now, this first part, we looked at some of the errors in judgment in terms of allowing development on prime soil. Now we need to look at what the other areas can offer. Okay, next slide, please. So the provincial policy. Previous one. Yeah, thanks. All right. So it calls for townships to recognize agriculture as a primary activity and land use. Okay, we're going for viable agriculture. All right, next one. We have the 4, runs from severe limitations to class 7, which is no capacity. All right, having said that, next one, you have to be careful before you say there's no capacity. You see the soil, this is Desmond, and you see the pictures there of a very productive farm, and that is on class 4 soil. Next. The Moscow area, which is now, I understand, up for some severances, good for hay, viable for wheat and soybeans. Okay, next. This is an interesting one. Class 5 soil on Curl Road. It's deep but wet, supporting hay and till crops such as corn and buckwheat, depending on the spring rainfall. Okay, yeah, I got one hand. Oh, go down a bit. All right, there we are, yeah. Class 6, Bethel Road, and supports all kinds of sheep operation and so on. Going next, and there's class 7, and it's really hard, we're hard pressed to figure out the difference between 6 and 7. All right, conclusion. Next one. A 1-year moratorium on development. Later tonight, Jason Sands will present data on severances of over 2.5 acres that have affected class 1, 2, and 3 farmland. In his statistics, he will show that only 4% of severances were involving prime farmland. Could you go back to the zone 1, class 1 soil? Yeah, keep on going. Back to Strathcona there. Yeah, keep on going. Yep. And whoop. Go. No, the other way. Go forward. Keep on going. Yeah. Okay. And next one with the picture. Yeah. Okay. Now, in his statistics, what it shows is that these, by the way, the houses they're there, and I don't blame the neighbor, the people for buying the houses and setting up there. It's a beautiful location. But they were built in roughly 2018. And there is, during 2017 and 2018, there was roughly 1 severance per year. In fact, from 2017 to 2024, the average is 1.4. And then 2023 is a big jump to 6. What does that tell us? Unfortunately, not enough. When you go see that, when anybody driving by there will see at least 4 to, if not 5, new severances that have originated. Now, the history of that, obviously, I'm not aware of. But the fact is, even though for the year might only show 1, there's been a number of different separations of land. What would be much more interesting, a much more important statistic is what number of acres are we losing a year of prime soil? And how does that compare with the amount of prime soil that we have in Stone Mills? The other way it gets totally distorted is when you go, can we move that forward, please, to the Galbraith Field?
Time, Andrew, you're going to have to wrap it up.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up very quickly. So the Galbraith Field says 6 severances, but its fact is it's 50 acres of lost prime land, as is the land on Strathcona there. When you add up all the fragmentation, it comes up to around 45 acres when you look on a Google map. So we call for a moratorium. We call for a comprehensive inventory of viable farmland. We call for an independent committee of soil experts and farmers to make such an inventory and be accountable to the council as a whole. And I say develop a new planning culture that is consistent with the township's official plan, provincial policies, prioritizing soils and agriculture over development. And I understand why we had development, but I think we're coming to a new phase now where we have to think differently. Thank you.
Andrew, questions for Andrew? So that was a great presentation. Thanks, Andrew. And I know you could have gone on. And I appreciate the points you've raised. I would point out, and I don't want to get into a sort of an argument or anything or defense, it was farmers who came to the township and asked for that redesignation. And as you pointed out, at that time, no one envisioned this as being a problem with land values coming to the point that they have come to. Nor did the Committee of Adjustment have any legal choice with the Galbraith decision. It's zoned rural according to the policies in the law. If they had turned down that application, the developer would have been within his rights to sue the committee and the township, and our legal advice was they would have won hands down. That's the unfortunate situation. I don't think council has any dispute with any of the points raised in your delegations. What we have to determine, and fairly soon, is what are we going to do about it? And your idea of a moratorium on development is one approach, and we're going to have to discuss that. In any case, Mr. Embry, your turn is at hand.
Thank you, Mr. Wise. Councilor Reeve Wise, 1 second. I appreciate the opportunity, Reeve, council, staff, to present to you. It's probably overdue. Should have did this a while back, but here I am tonight. Thank you. So on my first slide, it says no farmers, no food, no food future in Stone Mills Township if policies don't change. Second slide, please. Every acre counts in Stone Mills. This is a picture of 1594 Camden Road, which should never have happened. Ontario's and Stone Mills Township's farmland is a finite and non-renewable resource that we cannot afford to lose. Even so, we lose over 319 acres of farmland every day to non-agriculture development, like urban sprawl pictured above. This rate of loss is unsustainable and will impact future generations. It is more important than ever before the township protects our agriculture areas. Ontario and Stone Mills farmland directly supports the agri-food sector, which is the largest economical driver in Stone Mills. Farming is the largest economical sector in the province and in this township, employing more than 750,000 Ontarians along the supply chain and annually contributing over 47 billion to the province's GDP. Everyone in Ontario relies on agriculture, from the food we eat to the jobs in our communities. Without strong protections in place for our farmland, we may not be able to provide enough food to feed our growing population and community. Next slide. Stone Mills is the biggest driver of agriculture in LNA. For example, our two farms, Hillview Farms in Lennox Park, farmed by Edward and Martha and Ethan and Morgan Embry, use 6,500 tons of grain per year to feed its livestock. We would need 2,500 acres to supply that input need. Plus, we need 450 acres of hay acreage. There is not 2,950 acres in our present area. Therefore, every acre counts close to home. We like to gather our needs for our livestock as close to home as we can. It's less trucking, handling, and expense. It also keeps jobs and economy going right here in Stone Mills. That is the same for the rest of the farm operations in Stone Mills also. The statement that there is no future for farming in Stone Mills could not have be more false. Though we have seen a decrease in milk and beef farms, we have seen a sharp rise in crop farming over the past years in Stone Mills. The world's need for grain as both food, fuel, and other processes has risen sharply. Stone Mill's grain output is now a very large portion of our local farms' prosperity here. Taking acres to build homes here just don't make good sense for us as farmers or people needing food in the future. Protecting all the farmland and farms and Stone Mills is essential for our future, not just a portion called prime agriculture, because all farming is of prime importance for all of us in Stone Mills. The next you will see some pictures of farms, 6 farms. No future for farming in Stone Mills is false. There's a picture of Hillview Farms in Newburgh, Sutton's Dairy Farm in Strathcona, River Valley Poultry Farm in Newburgh, Lennox Pork Farm in Newburgh, Lockridge Dairy Farm in Newburgh, and McLaughlin's Dairy Farm in Tamworth. All these farms and farmland need protection in Stone Mills. Stone Mills official plan, 4.4.2 agriculture. Prime agriculture lands are areas with a high potential for agriculture production. The lands designated as agriculture as shown on Schedule A to this plan. No, this designation does not include other agriculture lands which are not classified as prime agriculture lands, but still support agriculture activity. Reference should be made to Section 423 of this plan for agriculture use in rural area. It is the intent of this plan to preserve prime agriculture lands in order to ensure its availability on a long-term basis by protecting it from incompatible uses. Agriculture land is defined as that land which exhibits some or all of the following characteristics. 1, prime agriculture lands means land that includes specialty crop areas and Canada land inventory classes 1, 2, 3, and soils as amended from time to time in this order of priority for protection. 2, additional areas where farms exhibit characteristics of ongoing viable agriculture, and additional areas where local market conditions ensure agriculture viability. What we were told at the Stone Mills Township Committee of Adjustment meeting on January 3rd, 2024 was that the only land protected was that in Schedule A referred to as prime ag. But this is contrary to what the official plan of Stone Mills states. Stone Mills official plan defined agriculture land areas. Agriculture land is defined as that land which exhibits some or all of the following characteristics. Let's break down these 3 differences areas of definition. 1, prime agriculture land means land that includes specialty crop areas and or Canada lands inventory classes 1, 2, and 3 soils as amended from time to time in this order of priority for protection. We know 1 represents the farmland in Moscow area defined in Schedule A. 2, additional areas where farms exhibit characteristics of ongoing viable agriculture. And on January 11, 2024, I met with Jason Sands, the Manager of Development Services for Township of Stone Mills. I asked him to define the additional area that 2 would represent. He stated without any hesitation that it would be Embry Road. 3, in addition, additional areas where local market conditions ensure agriculture viability. I then asked Jason what 3 would be defined as. I stated that would be the Galbraith land north of Camden East. I then defined my statement. Additional farm areas, a rural area where farm is practiced. Local market condition. A local market is limited to a small territory or land as a certain conditions. Definition of agriculture viability. Agriculture viability is the ability of a farmer or a group of farmers to maintain an economical, viable farm business. A farm which, with current management, produces an income greater than the poverty level of income, Canada, 1969, page 21. Viability can be defined as the ability of a farm to meet its financial obligations. Agriculture viability is the jurisdiction ability to sustain profitable farm enterprises, support wealth creation through agriculture, and retain land in production for future generation. It builds on the concept of farm viability, or an individual farm's ability to sustain long-term production and succession. Local market conditions ensure agriculture viability. It is therefore clearly stated in Stone Mill's official plan that Stone Mills ensures agriculture viability. There are 3 areas of agriculture land defined. It is also clearly defined, as it states, exhibits characteristics of ongoing viable agriculture. Therefore, the Galbraith land would be clearly defined in the official plan of Stone Mills Township and fit the definitions of the official plan. How can it be any more clear? The Galbraith land is valuable farmland which exhibits characteristics of ongoing viable agriculture and must be retained in production for future generations. Ask yourself, how can the farmers of Stone Mills Township maintain their economical viable farm businesses to meet their financial obligations when Stone Mills Township continues to take their farmland away from them? What the Township of Stone Mills has permitted is it is service to other prime ag farmland or areas, but by not appropriately including them in the official plan. This is because from 2001 to present, there has been no change in Stone Mills' official plan concerning the protection of farmland. OFA leaders and OMAFRA staff are puzzled why obligations to protect Stone Mills farmland have not been updated in 22 years. Rising farm prices threaten Stone Mills farmers. Of particular concern to Stone Mills farmers are the rapidly rising farmland prices that are creating barriers for new farms to enter agriculture, threatening the viability of our local food sector and pressing farmers with higher values of purchase of farm properties, making it unsustainable to farm here. But in Stone Mills, there has been a whole other dynamic at work because of poor policy development by council to protect farmland. In recent years, urbanites and home purchasers have been buying real properties to retire or to work from home. However, much of the price acceleration has come from developers or companies speculating on farmland for profit. Many of these farmland properties have been severed, creating the fragmentation of farmland, thus encroaching on farm businesses and hindering the productivity of farmers in Stone Mills by spreading the land to non-farm activities. Development has become the largest component of Stone Mills and Ontario farmland values. Therefore, by developing policies that discourage the fragmentation of farmland and encourage growth on those lands of poor quality soils and within our hamlets, we will preserve our viable farm community and farmland for future generations. How am I doing? Okay, 1 second. Might have to give me an extra minute. My throat's getting dry. Correct. Protecting all farmland in Stone Mills Township. All farmland is of prime importance in Stone Mills, no matter what its classification is. As I've illustrated in Appendix 1 and 2, we need to think about the broader concept of protection here. We also need to establish that good productive farmland, such of the Galbraith land north of the village of Camanese, is preserved for future generations. It is just not right to protect one area called prime ag land and leave the rest of Stone Mills farmland unprotected. Other municipalities have policies that ensure the protection of agricultural productive land from the encroachment of incompatible land uses by restricting the location of residential, commercial, and industrial development on such land, and thus encouraging those to never locate unproductive farmland or farms from farm areas of interest to the municipality. Let's do the same here in Stone Mills. Protecting farm areas in Stone Mills Township. A massive amount of food is produced from our livestock farmers in Stone Mills. All those farmers need protection to continue to support our #1 economical driver, farming in Stone Mills and Ontario. To prevent encroachment by neighboring non-agriculture and residential development, Stone Mills livestock farms need sufficient separation of potential and developing situations to ensure that no adverse economical impact would result in the viability of their farm businesses. Increasingly, Stone Mills farmers are finding it more and more difficult to continue their livestock operations because of the fragmentation of the agricultural land base through lot creation and housing developments. Stone Mills Township farmland preservation. The dynamics have now changed. Since the introduction of prime agriculture land in Moscow area by 2 farms to limit home development and protect their farmlands, we now see a complete change in the dynamics of Stone Mills agriculture sector. To accommodate that change, appropriate actions must be taken now to ensure viability for agriculture operations and the protection of farmland for future generations. Other municipalities have protected theirs. I suggest Stone Mills Council implement a new bylaw or official plan change. The heading would read, Stone Mills Township values its character and food economical agriculture, and agriculture forms the most significant component of the township's economical base. Therefore, these new changes will ensure the long-term viability of farms and farmland in the township for future generations. Other municipal official plan components. It is important to define clearly what other municipalities include, see attached Appendix 1, that defines their objectives, what protection they give to all classes of farmland, the agricultural, residential, commercial consents, and severance policies. I believe the intent of the Stone Mills, of the Township of Stone Mills official plan now currently in use was to protect all the areas of farmland and farms in the township, as I have illustrated. However, this present undefined official plan has left room for errors by council, staff, and the Committee of Adjustment throughout the years. This leads to the fragmentation and loss of farmland we deeply need to preserve. As you can see, Stone Mills Township's official plan is not current with the official plans and bylaws of other municipalities and Ontario. In Appendix 1-2, I give examples of the changes need to be adopted by Stone Mills Council to be current and continue to make our farms and farmlands viable in the township. I am sure that other examples of current official plans and bylaws exist in Ontario that will help to strengthen the adaptation of our current policy changes, and the council will use all the resources they can to adopt and amend the official plan or bylaws to preserve farmlands and farms in the township. Lastly, the importance of the carbon footprint of Stone Mills farmland. Another very important component to adopt a change in policy would be for the carbon footprint that the protection of farmland would impose. An acre of Stone Mills Township corn absorbs in excess of 36,000 pounds of carbon dioxide per acre in a growing season. Farmland fields can help clean up and protect the environment. Housing developments do not. The housing sector is one of the largest contributors to Ontario's greenhouse gas emissions. It contributes 23% of total greenhouse gas emissions of the province, second only to transportation. Putting more homes on farmland would result in a negative carbon footprint for Stone Mills. As you can see, we are at a crossroads. What council decides will shape our township for generation. Food plays a vital role in our lives, our heritage, and our interactions with each other. I hope you feel as deeply about our future as we farmers do. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
I've put recommendations I gave to everybody. I put it on your table in front of you. Recommendations that I'm saying that we should. In this presentation too, I've added all the appendixes, so you can look through the appendixes. If you have any questions, I can answer them now, or at any time you can. I'm sure you can find my email or my phone number.
Thanks, Ed. Any questions or comments for Ed at this point? Seeing none, Jacob, you're next up. If you want to pass the mic over to Jacob there, Ed, that would be great. Thanks very much. The floor is yours, Jacob.
Thank you. It falls to me to do some summarizing and to give further recommendations. So there'll be I'll be repeating some things that you've heard, but they'll come in the context that I'm making. Also to introduce myself, Jacob Ellens. I'm an academic, retired historian, but I grew up on a farm. My father, grandfather, in fact, back many generations in the Netherlands, worked on the land. Most of my ancestors were agricultural laborers. They couldn't afford to buy farms. And when the Second World War was over, my father wanted to move. He wanted to come to Canada because there he knew he had a chance of buying land and farming. He succeeded. I have a brother who went to Alberta after 2 years at Guelph and farmed several thousand acres of cattle, something that gave a great pleasure to my parents. In growing up that way, I want to say that I feel a great passion for agriculture, for land. And in fact, it's something that animates me. It also gets me angry when it's misused. So if I sound angry at times, that's why. Okay, just some background. First slide. Those of us who are making presentations to you today come with a sense of hope. The Council is now recognizing that our land use practices as well as our policies are in disarray and need to be set right. We will cheer you on, but as you've heard from my two colleagues, we're here to challenge you as well. I'm just going to summarize a few things that come in this slide. What we feel very strongly about is that we really need to diagnose the problem, some of which we've heard from both my colleagues, but also then to make it very clear that we think a lot of work has to be done. There's no easy fix for this because there's been a problem here for a long time. So we're asking for really careful work. Next slide, please. On 29 November 23, a number of us met with the Committee of Adjustment regarding an application by the developer, Mr. Theo Nyberg, to sever land in an agricultural field that you've heard about just north of Camden East. We argued that they should reject the application to turn 50 acres of valuable Class 2 soil farmland into building lots. We based our appeal on the pledges given the official plans of both county and township, including the declaration above, which is the intent of our official township plan. Namely, the plan says that we aim to preserve prime agricultural land in order to ensure its availability on a long-term basis by protecting it from incompatible uses. Next, please. A memorable point in the meeting on the 29th of November came when one of the members of the Committee of Adjustment turned to face us and said, "Our hands are tied." We've heard that from the Reeve. He went on to say, if we accept your argument to reject the developer's application to sever, the developer would sue the township and the developer would win. Well, the developer was present and he did not speak to assure the committee or us that he would not sue. We recognize, sorry, next slide, yeah. We recognize that our township is in a legal bind. The committee and you, our council, are prevented from acting for the common good of our township, including from carrying out the promises given in the official plans of both township and county to protect into perpetuity our valuable farmland. The nub of our quandary is that zoning decisions made 2 decades ago make a mockery of protecting our farmland from development. Next. I want to say a few things about zoning, some of which you've already heard. Some 20 years ago, a number of farmers who were understandably unhappy that the then very restrictive rules prevented them from severing lots even from their own family members, asked for that to change. And the solution was the 4 men who set out, as you've heard. Well, on the basis of a rather rudimentary survey, and after a small and hardly representative survey of farmers' wishes, they recommended to council that the Moscow area should be designated as prime agricultural land and be reserved for farming, and the rest of the township to be defined as rural, allowing both farming and house building. Please note that this zoning decision was political. It was not based on primarily objective criteria. Although the 4-man surveying crew was not unaware of soil classifications, they were apparently not bothered by the fact that there were significant areas of class 4 to 6 soils in the Moscow area, as well as productive prime lands, soil classifications 1 through 3 in the rest of the township. The Moscow ruling was based primarily in the reality that there were really 2 major landholders who insisted that their family land should be preserved into the future for exclusively agricultural purposes. So much for science. Let me make a comment here. If you look at, we have a map here that one of our group has been very industrious about, and this is what we look here at the bottom, the south end of our township. What's very interesting is that you'll notice the square of Moscow lands. Well, what it shows is that there are 112 hectares of number 2 soil, and this on top of that, a larger part consists of number 4 soil. Now, then if we look at the map that Mr. Sands has given us, and something that you'll be working at, especially at the next meeting, but it comes up today. If you look at the map that he has there, you'll see there, looking from Centerville north to Enterprise, a very, very large area of 2,212 hectares, Class 1. Now, the thing that's interesting, and this is where we have to realize what happened, what went wrong in that zoning. According to the zoning that was accepted a couple of decades ago, all of that is rural. But clearly, a Class 1 land, we know what it is. It's prime agricultural land. That has got to change. Next, please. Now, Mr. Robert Clancy, chair of the Committee of Adjustment, who was one of the 4 who made the one-day surveying tour 2 decades ago, and who recounted that tale to us, told us at the committee meeting dealing with the Galbraith severance application in September, I think speaking somewhat whimsically, he said, well, maybe it was a mistake. I don't know. Well, we want to say, in retrospect, the zoning policy was a colossal mistake. For one thing, it made a farce out of our official plan that declares that the township is committed to preserve good farmland for posterity. Secondly, the decision 2 decades ago introduced a bylaw that failed entirely to show how permission to build houses was to be linked going forward with a promise to protect farmland from development. Next, please. Let me proffer one illustration, and you've heard of this already, one illustration of our failed land use policy within the last decade. It jumps out at us every time we drive southwest down County Road 1 near Strathcona. We see 2 houses built on the former Hudgens farm. 2 houses are pictured in Mr. Embry's presentation. You've seen it. What recently was a large productive farm consisting of rich Class 1 and 2 soil has been carved into 2 large 30, 40 acre building lots for just 2 new houses. The houses are gracious and the setting lovely and highly desirable, but the estates built there symbolize the bankruptcy of our township's land use planning. The planning, or rather the lack of it, represents our moral failure to steward our land. And that, yeah, when I think about my grandfathers, that makes me angry. Further, the development makes a mockery of any claim that our township cares at all about designating land for those desperately in need of housing. Next, please. In the past 5 years, some 400 houses have been built. I may be wrong about that, so we'll leave that for now, and I'm sure that Mr. Sands will give us a more accurate picture. But what is true is that they were built with no real rationale for where they ought to be built, or what lands were out of bounds, if any. And I think, unfortunately, there's really not much out of bound right now. We are willing to admit that the zoning decision of 2 decades ago, although misguided and irrational, was well-intentioned. No one in the year 2000 could have foreseen the unintended consequences. Next, please. During the past decade, we seem to have been sleepwalking as our township has agreed to multiple requests to sever agricultural land to build houses. It's not fully clear whether we have continued to be careless with our land or have become willful in wanting to give almost carte blanche to any scheme to build. There's actually some evidence that we may have chosen deliberately to disregard our formal commitments to safeguard farmland. I'm sorry for sounding nasty here, but I think this has to be said. At the meeting of 27 September, when the Committee of Adjustment met for the first time to consider the application of Mr. Nyberg to develop the 50-acre Galbraith field, those of us who had come to ask the committee to consider our appeal that the application be rejected were startled when Mr. Clancy, chair of the committee, spoke from the chair only a few minutes into the proceedings to declare that in his long experience farming in the township, he knew, and I quote, "There's no future for farming in this township," end of quote. The only hope for the township to thrive, he declared, was to build houses. Now, I do want to say some nice things about Mr. Clancy. I know that shortly after the first time that we dealt with the Mr. Nyberg's application, that Mr. Clancy wrote to Mr. Sands to express concerns about the lots, whether they in fact were sufficient to hold the septic systems. Also, he was concerned that the property, quote, was being proposed for multiple severances. So he did show his farming instincts in that, I'm happy to say. Next, please. I mentioned that we were startled. We had done our research and had worked hard to develop cogent arguments. We assumed that the Committee of Adjustment was a professional body, which would carefully and impartially, and I want to emphasize that, weigh all the arguments that would be made in the course of the meeting before making its conclusion. But before one of us had even spoken, the chair had declared his judgment. Should we conclude that the committee, appointed by you, has in effect adopted as its guiding or its working policy that the land protection pledges in our official plan are merely window dressing that ought to be disregarded? And unfortunately, the decisions that have been made recently, including at the Galbraith, about allowing houses to be built on the richest agricultural land are not inconsistent with that rather cynical assumption. Next, please. Well, anyway, I sounded like a prophet of gloom. Now let me talk about some signs of hope. We are happy that there are indications that council, that you have begun to grapple with a lack of bylaws that could give teeth to the intent of our official plan to preserve farmland. And we're relieved that Mr. Sands has been directed by council, by you, to bring in a report to come with policy options to deal with severance applications on lands classified 1 through 3 under the Canadian Land Inventory Classification System. And on behalf of a number of us, I'll suggest that this is a very good beginning, but we believe it needs to go further. Now, I'll come now to recommendations that I want to give, and I think you've all received the printed recommendations. I thought that might be easier for you to read them that way, and I'll read from here as well. Okay, but you can continue with the slide. There's one slide that carries a lot of verbiage. Now, recommendation 1, we believe the council must redo, based on objective criteria, the zoning of all land in the township. These criteria are provided by the province of Ontario in its provincial policy statement under the Planning Act of 1990, and they're reflected in the official plans of both our township and our county. You've heard this already, but it's so basic that I want to read it again. The province's regulation directs us, and I quote, "Prime agricultural areas shall be protected for long-term use for agriculture. Prime agricultural areas are areas where prime agricultural lands predominate. Specialty crop areas are given the highest priority for protection, followed by Canada Land Inventory Class 1, 2, and 3 lands, and then any associated Class 4 through 7 lands within the prime agricultural area in this order of priority." Now, you see, this is an OMAFRA statement. I do want to mention that this protection that is talked about here by the province, by our township, is not just for Class 1, 2, and 3, although I deeply appreciated that council members have made a motion asking Mr. Sands to do this work. But we do want to suggest, yes, clearly 1 and 3, we can't have a repeat of some of the tragedies that have been happening and losing the best farmland, but we also have to be very, very careful to recognize that in the way farming really works, that, as we heard from Mr. Embry, for example, from both of my colleagues, that in fact, very, very frequently throughout the township, Class 1, 2, or 2 and 3 land are adjacent to 4, 5, and 6 land. And so we really need a plan that takes into account how farming is actually done and needs to be protected in this township. And here in A, expansion of protection for arable lands, it should be noted further that developments in agriculture in the past decade make it possible profitably to grow crops such as soybeans in soil classes 4 to 6, thus expanding the parts of our township where agriculture should be promoted. And I won't quote Lennox and Addington here because I think I'll run out of time. I should add that when we expand like this and grow crops on more marginal soil, we do have to be careful that there's regular monitoring groundwater to make sure that there are no herbicides in the soil. Recommendation 2, and here comes in 4 parts. Recommendation 2, council needs to draw up a comprehensive development plan. A, the plan must call for a full inventory of soils in the township conducted by an independent committee. The committee should consist of farmers and soil experts with the authority to report directly to council. B, The plan must designate areas where land with soil classes 1 through 6, we would argue, not just 1 to 3, are given explicit protection. And here I would suggest that given the way that we've become so negligent and the way everybody, certainly the developers, think we're an easy mark, we need to make it very clear that that's going to stop. So we recommend that council adopt a new bylaw that will guide all of our land use planning with wording to the effect that Stone Mills Township values its agricultural character and food economy. Agriculture forms the most significant component of the township's economic base. For that reason, our land use policies and practices will be carried out in such a way as to ensure the long-term viability of farms and farmland in the township of Stone Mills for future generations. C, the plan must designate areas suited to house building. And we contend that such designation should be initiated by council, but with the participation of farmers and also of residents of this township, on the basis of the council's judgment of the common good, and not by the monetary interests of developers or private interests. And D, the development plan must be drafted with the full participation of the residents of our township. To ensure that our residents are encouraged to participate fully, council needs to invite participation in venues such as official public meetings, informal public meetings, open houses, and workshops. This comes, by the way, everything having to do with land use planning in the Township of Stone Mills official plan. And here I went, and I'm sounding, I don't know if I sound angry throughout, but I don't mean to, but here I do want to say that we feel, and I sort of feel this very strongly, that what's really been lacking for quite some time is proper participation of residents. I think we're doing the bare minimum. For example, I think what should have happened when we were setting out to perhaps consider the development of the Galbraith-Nyberg field, residents should have been asked if they were content to turn that field with Class 2 soil and with a surface that's a recharge area over giant aquifer, as well, into a housing development in the quest to increase the property tax base for the township. There are several arguments on different sides of that, but according to our land use directions that come from county and township, we really need to sit down with residents to ask, well, what are you looking for? What are you hoping for? And we haven't been getting that. Recommendation 3, we urge council to adopt an interim control bylaw. This has already been said by Mr. Embry. We believe that our land use planning is in a state of crisis. It is not governed by objective principles. There are no clear guidelines to direct how the building of houses and the preserving of farmland can be accomplished in harmony. We ask that you immediately declare a moratorium on the development of farmland for 1 year. And here, I'm sure you must know this, developers have been buying up extensive tracts of land, including some of our richest farmland in the Napanee River Basin. And I don't have the number here, I've heard it. The amount of land that has already been purchased is there. I think of it as wolves just sort of circling the lambs or the calves. And you folks are going to have to deal with that. So I want to argue that we need an immediate moratorium. And this is something now in terms of an interim control bylaw. When I wrote the slides, and I wasn't yet aware this could be done so quickly, but one of our good researchers has pointed out to us that, in fact, a declaration of an interim control bylaw, you can do that tonight if you were moved to do that. Because all it does is that you're not making any particular actions, you're just giving yourselves a year to do the hard work that has to be done. How much time do I have? -5 minutes. Oh, you've been very kind.
But I've allowed you to continue because now we're getting to specific recommendations.
Okay.
We all know the problem. You've all illustrated very well. It's not news to us.
Okay.
What we need are paths forward, and that's what you're dealing with now, Jacob. So take it to your
You're very kind. I can finish this very, very directly. Just one more thing about the interim control bylaw, and that is that the thing that needs to be pointed out is that we know perfectly well that there are untold numbers of applications that are already in, and when you declare a moratorium, you have to go deal with all of those. All of those will be dealt with according to our old terrible zoning practices. But that's exactly why developers are sitting there and are certainly buying more, and before more applications come in, And they're going to become showing up at Mr. Sand's door, and I think that you aren't to blame for what happened 20 years ago, but you have the responsibility for dealing with what's going to happen right now. So I have to say that. Okay, lastly, getting back to the slides. There's one slide. One slide at the very bottom. One slide. You see a field there with snow on it? Yeah, that's it. My question is, what do you see? Well, I mean, if you look carefully, you'll see that this is a harvested cornfield under snow. I'd say a speculator sees it as an opportunity to flip land to make a quick profit. A developer may see a handy cleared field in which to build houses, again, profit. This is the Galbraith-Nyberg field. It is taking in its winter sleep, resting from having produced a healthy crop of corn out of rich Class II farmland. It's waiting to regain its energy to produce yet another crop in the next growing season, as it's done faithfully since it was cleared of trees, perhaps some 150 years ago by our pioneer ancestors. Then there's something else. But the other thing, you can't really see it. It's under the surface of this sleeping field. It's a giant aquifer, a great underground lake that secures the water supply to all of Camden East and far beyond. It and the recharge area that is a soil cover over the aquifer is fragile. Two of our group, who have been researching the issues of water resources and pollution dangers, want to talk with you at a subsequent meeting about water issues and how these must be taken into account when you make land use decisions. And of course, given that the provisional okay has been given to developing the Galbraith land, that will depend in part on the way you analyze the state of the water and pollution. Now, here I want to, and I'm going to end with this. We recognize that there's much that needs to be done, which, by the way, is why you need a year to pause from your frenetic building. And we want to support you. We want to work with you in the essential and challenging work that's ahead. And one more thing, and then I'll quit. And that this is very much a personal matter. I want to say that I know that I've perhaps at times sounded harsh or impassioned. However, I want to say that although I talked about your responsibility, it's also the case that I have to admit, part of the responsibility of why we are where we are is that we as the residents of this township have not done what we should have to challenge you, to tell you what we needed. I've talked to a lot of farmers who were unhappy, but the farmers also had a responsibility to speak to you as counselors and to voice their concerns about the growing price of farmland. So I think that all of us have responsibility for what's gone wrong, and I hope we can work together to fix it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jacob. Very eloquently expressed. Any questions or comments from councils at this point? I would simply say that very little of what you said comes as a surprise to council, which doesn't diminish its importance in any way at all. I think council is of like mind with the farming community and many of the residents of the township that a mistake was certainly made 20 years ago. I'm not sure that a tremendous amount of good farmland has been lost to development, but there is certainly the potential. I would also point out that it is farmers who are selling that good farmland.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And it's, as farmers, we should be encouraging fellow farmers not to go after the short-term gain and consider the long-term pain of losing our farmland to development. I won't go on because we're going to have many discussions about this topic, but we do have to do something fairly quickly, and I believe our planner, Acting CAO Jason Sands, is going to bring some policy change to our next meeting. It won't satisfy all your recommendations. I don't think we have time to quickly develop something, but it will make a good start. Whether we go for an interim control bylaw or not will be up to council to debate. At this time, and I didn't do this before the delegations, but I should have, I simply need a motion to receive. Doug and Sherry, any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Oh, did you have a comment, Wenda? Yes, I already asked for that and you didn't pipe up, Wenda. Well, I should have given you more a chance. Go ahead, Wenda.
Wonderful to see such a good turnout for a very, very important topic. I guess Reeve Wise has addressed certain things, and that moving forward, you know, we're going to be taking your ideas to heart and looking at how we can, you know, modernize the official plan and the way in which farmland is allowed to be developed. There's so many balls in the air on this subject, so many. And the decision that was made 20 years ago certainly, from my 9 years on council, has, you know, we just said, no, you know, it's not prime ag. I guess they can develop it. You've brought some interesting points to light here that we can work with, I believe. But there is something that you need to realize what we're facing. And I'm not diminishing your points of view one bit when I state this. So we've been battling with the government, provincial government, about aggregate, because they say our township is full of it and we can't develop homes on aggregate because they might want to come in and chop up some rock and haul it off to Toronto and build out into the lake and have their developments go up. So we had tasked our clerk, a deputy clerk at the time, to look at our aggregate and find out, you know, were there pockets of development land that were adjacent to aggregate that maybe we could develop. Then the government came out and said, oh, now you can only develop if your land is adjacent to a hamlet. So that was all of a sudden looking at how are we going to develop our township when we're restricted by the aggregate, we're restricted by the hamlets and the proximity. And then the government comes out and says, oh, we've created 2 new acts and we want you to build homes faster. Well, where do you put them? And according to our policy, if it wasn't prime ag, it could go on that land. So having you bring this forward tonight is really good news, because now we can look at that and have a much better map of what our township looks like and where we can be directing developers or homeowners or potential property owners to a better spot than 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6. And I've got some 7 in my backyard. Anyway, thank you. I just wanted to share the whole picture.
Yeah, go ahead, Ed. Yeah.
If you look at Lotus Township, if you call council and look at Lotus Township, I believe they only have, they were struck with the same thing what you're talking about. So they have aggregate and farmland. If you look at the way they structured it and structured their UOP, you'll get satisfaction in that.
Okay,
What you're talking about.
thank you.
Yeah, that's a good place to look, is just at what Loyalist has done. Anything further from anyone? Crystal Lee?
So you say we all reckon there's a lot of balls in the air.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and that's why we're all agreed here on this side, certainly for more important. This is not an easy problem to solve.
No.
Crystal Lee, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I have some notes. Some, I wasn't sure whether to say it here or after Jason, so it's going to come up a little bit again about addressing the farmland policy. I just, some of us were at Roma recently, and the president of Ontario Federation of Agriculture was there. And a really interesting stat that he said is that only 5% of land in Ontario is available for use for agriculture. So that's why this 319 acres lost daily is incredibly alarming. And then if we take that, the way that that is sped up from 175 to 319, we have to imagine, well, where are we now? We're even further ahead. I'm sure it's higher than 319 acres. And Leonard Austin, the president of LAFA, said, when agricultural land is developed, it's lost forever. And once farmland is gone, it is gone forever. I think we're all in agreement with that here. And I'm seeing more and more farmland signs go up for sale on farmland, including sales up for sale and now sold along the Cataraqui Trail. I think another reason it's really vital that we act, because along the Cataraqui Trail, which we've put money in, is an amazing outdoor spot. It's now increased the value of that land for people to put houses next to it. And a lot of that is farmland. And I would hate to think that the good acts that we did to improve that trail are now expediting the process of farmland on the chopping block. So I feel like that's why it's even more important that we act now. I just want to add that I don't fault the Committee of Adjustment. I think everyone made the best decision they had with the information and direction that they had. It's not the directive of that committee to set policy. That is our responsibility. And I certainly stand on the side of 99% of farmers in Ontario that this needs to end. And when we come back on February 20th with potential policy options, The interim control bylaw that has come up, I would like us to really explore that as an option. Because then we need to see every option explored. Here's my, every option explore halting further severances on prime agricultural land from class at least 1 to 3, because we need to review the discrepancy in our official plan with the current zoning and review and reassess the process that put us in this position. And that's all I really want to say, that I really believe we need to do whatever we can, and I'm not going to accept that our hands are tied. I get that in one sense, but on the other, I'm not going to accept that that is our best answer. And so if an interim control bylaw could get us there, I think that we really need to explore that as an option.
Thanks, Christopher. Anyone else from council? Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, great presentations. Really, really well done. I know it's not easy for you to do what you're doing, and you weren't angry at all. All I heard was passion and some common sense. It's fine. You're forgiven. Just a quick thing here. I like analogies, folks. It's how I function. And I get what you're saying 100%. I'm a Fenwick. I understand a farm, even though I've never farmed myself. But I appreciate every bit of it. And this is difficult. That's the one thing I appreciate about what you're doing here, is you recognize the difficulty here. What we have is a pendulum swing. That's what I like to call it. It went all the way this way in a hurry. And now we're talking about swinging all the way out in a hurry. Somewhere in the middle is the best place. But where is it? So I think about, the first thought that comes to mind, I think of Bob Hanna, who just left us recently, and how he severed a piece of land across the road from his farm. They've been there since 1837, that family. It must have been difficult for him to take a piece of his farm and build a house on it. But from that, he was across from his grandkids, across from his son, across from his daughter-in-law, until he died. So you think about the severances. And he also sold a piece of that farm off once to keep the farm in his name, to keep going. So now his son owns it and his family. So there's reasons why things happen, and it's really going to be hard for us to figure this out. So if you have patience with us, we'll have patience with you. Sound good?
Anyone else? In that case, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay. A much more mundane but essential item is bylaws and resolutions. 6.1, temporary borrowing bylaw. The recommendation is that bylaw 2024, to be numbered later, being a temporary borrowing bylaw, be enacted and passed, and that the Reeve and clerk be authorized to sign and seal. This is fairly standard. Every year we have to have this. Randy, did you have anything particular to add to the recommendation at this point? Any discussion? All in favor? I need a mover and a seconder. Crystal Lee and Wenda, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Staff reports. Acting CAO Sands. This is the Dallas Bentian delegation response. This gentleman made a presentation to council in December with various complaints, accusations, and assertions about his property and his road. And this is the report that council has brought, or that staff have brought back in response to his delegation at that time. Mr. Sands, did you want to elaborate in any way on the report you've brought forward?
Thank you, Reeve Wise. No, there's in our opinion as staff, as a collective, there's a few of us who put work into this. We've done a fairly exhaustive response to the questions received through the delegation. And I'm happy to answer any questions that may arise.
Questions from council on this report? Has this report been sent to Mr. Bentian?
Through Reeve Wise, no, not at this time. It's not been emailed directly. Staff can do so if that's the direction we receive.
I should have got a mover and seconder. Would the mover consider having this report sent directly to Mr. Bentian? Sherry, would you move that? So we receive and have this forwarded to Dallas Bentian. Seconder, Rob, any further discussion? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Management of Development Services Deputy Clerk Sand, Agricultural Land Policy Update. Can I get a recommendation that this report be received? Oh, sorry. 8.2 I missed. Oh, that's subsequent, I think, Brandy, is it not? I've got 8.2 as Manager Development Services Sands. Maybe. Oh, we got it mixed up.
No, it's right on there.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, thanks. So this is a little bit of information about agricultural policy options respecting class 1 and 3 soils, and I just need a mover and second to receive this. Doug and Sherry. Jason, go ahead.
Thank you, Reeve Wise, and thank you to all those from the public who've joined us this evening. I appreciate the comments in which we've received so far to date regarding this topic. For those of you in the community who are not aware, staff were directed by council in the December meeting, December 11th, to provide a report in Q1 of 2024 respecting the future potential policy regulations on class 1, 2, 3, and so 1, 2, 3 class lands. This is largely an update report to confirm that that's still underway and being completed. The report also confirms that there's an appendix or Exhibit A that details what we've been informed by CLI or Canadian Land Inventory to be those lands in question. So that's of note. And Reeve Wise and I have had a fairly open communication stream over the past month to this end. And we really wanted to just provide this for information's sake at this juncture, given that we had some interest from the community members leading the delegations this evening. With respect to some of the numbers, I do want to jump into quickly in this staff report. There's a table that dates back, I think, 7 years, 2017 through 2023. And it speaks to the total number of consent applications, because that was a specific request of one of the concerned members of the community from our office and department. The biggest thing that jumps out to at first blush is a massive number of applications, in my opinion. 364 applications over a 7-year span of consent applications is quite a large number. What we have not done is detail what percentage of those is lot creation versus lot adjustment through a boundary adjustment versus easement creation versus validation of title. So please appreciate that that number looks large, but it's misleading in the sense that that's not 364 lots that have been created over that time frame. And I'm not trying to hide data, or I should say we as staff are not trying to hide data. That is simply a fairly comprehensive exercise in trying to review every one of those 364 files to determine what it pertains to. So that work wasn't done for inclusion in this report. Our apologies. What we have done is include a further exhibit to this report, and it identifies some maps, which were actually the survey sketches that were submitted in support of the consent applications that resulted in lot creation of parcels greater than 2.5 acres on lands that are 1, 2, and 3 soils as detailed in Exhibit A. So it was brought up during the delegation, and I'd like to reiterate it, to give a sense of the background to the number of lots that exceed the minimum area requirement as prescribed by the municipality in its official plan of 2.5 acres on these types of soils. I don't have fancy illustrations, I apologize, and I don't know the name on County Road 1 on the south side that was discussed in this evening's delegations multiple times. The Hudgens Farm, I believe, is what it can be commonly referred to. Those applications were predating 2017. So it was discussed that some of these numbers might be misleading, or there might be some, I don't want to call it error, but there might be some numbers that weren't included. They're not on this list because they predate 2017. I've put the applicants' names just for easy reference in my head in the table, and all of these applications were considered by the Committee of Adjustment and approved by the Committee of Adjustment, which, as you've noted in your delegation this evening, is a delegated committee of this council. There's a public process that's associated with that. I don't want to necessarily get into a back and forth with regards to meeting the minimum obligations and exceeding them. That being said, there's a public process that's associated with applications that proceed to the Committee of Adjustment. We do exceed the minimum requirements of the Planning Act here in our small operation. And I think tonight, even though we're not at a statutory public meeting, represents a good illustration of how well we do in engaging some of our community. I can thank you, members of the community, for doing that. However, this is a great turnout, and our Committee of Adjustment meetings have had full houses as well, and that's fantastic. There's bigger municipalities that receive a far fewer number of applicants or interested ratepayers that come to their meetings. So hats off for that. I'm happy to answer any questions that relate to the specifics of these files that were included for your review, but it is confirmed that there were 14 files for new lot creation over a 7-year span that exceeded the minimum lot area requirement on class 1, 2, and 3 soils in our municipality. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from council on the information? Wenda, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Jason, for this report. I'm just wondering if we can expand the scope of the report that you're planning to bring back on February the 20th to include classes 1 to 6, and also to include the possibility that we would be discussing a moratorium on the discussion of severing off rural farmland until we have discussed and decided what those classifications look like currently in today's climate. That
Mr.
wasn't part of the request that Doug and I made at the last meeting. So I'm wondering if we can expand the scope a little bit for your report.
What's your thoughts about that,
Thank you.
Mr. Sands?
Through you, Reeve Wise, Councillor Lalonde, thank you for the question. My twofold answer would be, considering the adoption of an interim control bylaw through the reporting that we're planning to provide to council on the 20th is absolutely within our mandate or mantra, if you will, in terms of reporting back, yes. With respect to expanding, essentially doubling the soil classification 1 through 6 as opposed to 1 through 3, if that's the decision of council at this evening's meeting, my comment would be we will not be seeing a report on the 20th, given the workload that changes from a scope of work perspective. We've had the better part of a month, notwithstanding Christmas holidays, into this, and there's a significant work commitment that goes into a project such as this. So we feel confident that we can prepare some policies for consideration of council and speak to the potential of an interim control bylaw at the 20th meeting. However, essentially 2 weeks out, doubling that, I don't feel confident in speaking to council and saying we can hit that deadline.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Doug.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. I want to talk about what's in front of us here, and I don't think that we can do this in all of what has to happen here or what's being required in a regular council meeting in the short time period. I think we should be considering, we may have to have a special meeting or two to do this. And one of the reasons I'm considering that is I agree with a number of these recommendations, but they're not going to happen, I don't think, with all the irons that we got in the fire in 2 weeks or 3 weeks' time. So one of the recommendations that's not here, or at least ways it's not here in the way I read it, that I would like to see is I would like to see OMAFRA's representative of today address council, talk about soil types. The Ravelitis of today, because Ravelitis is no longer there, but I think none of us, I'm not a farmer, John, you're the only farmer on the council. that we need to have somebody, an expert, talk to us about soil types. And I'm going to take that back to when the decision was made 20 years ago, okay? It was thought to be correct to put the two counselors that were on the committee, sorry, got to correct that. Neither of the gentlemen were counselors. Mr. Kennedy was not a counselor. He was on the Committee of Adjustment at the time. The two farmers who were on the Committee of Adjustment, along with Ray Velitis and our planner, was thought to have the expertise at that time. And I do remember, although I wasn't involved with it, I do remember that Mr. Velitis said he would not designate small properties. He wanted larger sections to be designated in a planning area, which was exactly the problem that we had. The broad brush approach didn't work for all the farmers and everybody who owned property. So I would say that we all know we got to move forward with this, but we need to take the time to do it correctly so that we don't do the broad brush the wrong way, so that we leave all interested ratepayers involved in a situation that they can survive with. So I just like to add that comment that I'd like to have a representation at a meeting by OMAFRA. And I'd like this to give us consideration, which we can do on the 20th, to possibly even doing a special meetings on this. Because I think it's too much with all of the other that we got in the fire.
Thanks, Doug. Anyone else? Was that a motion?
That was a motion, yes.
To have a representative from OMAFRA come to a special meeting of council on the subject?
Sorry, there's a motion on the floor to receive for information moved by Deputy Reeve Davison and seconded by Councillor Milliken. So we can do a friendly amendment if you're both okay to invite OMAFRA representative.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yeah, so the motion is to receive Jason's report and in addition to have a representative from OMAFRA come and address council on the subject, not of soil types, but of Canada land class inventory, which is an important difference. You can have a wonderful soil, and I think as maybe Ed or Andrew pointed out, if it's waterlogged, it's useless. It could be the best soil in the world, but you can't farm it. Krista Lee, did you have anything to add?
Just looking at this report, and I understand it must have been a lot of work to kind of draw these numbers out of the applications and the map. One thing that I'm interested in is the possibility of us looking at the application itself, in that, is there any way that we're tracking on applications when a severance is coming on agricultural land? Could that be simply a box that's added on our applications where it's like, is this current use agriculture or not? I just noticed on the Galbraith farmland application, I believe a line said current use and it said none, which is, maybe it means in terms of a developmental use, it has none, like no use, but it didn't indicate to be an agricultural use. Is there a way that when we could look at our applications that we could add a segment that says agriculture, in which then we would, because we don't even have a full picture necessarily of what is happening in the rate, would that give us a tool that we could reference? It wouldn't be quite so much work to get a snapshot of what's happening.
Okay, we're into now supplementary questions which are going to be addressed. Can we deal with the motion at hand
yeah.
first, and then I'll get
Yeah.
Jason to address your comment? Anything else on the motion? All in favor then? That's carried. So Jason, what would be your response to something like that on a consent application to indicate current use of land as agricultural or not?
Yeah, thanks, Reeve Wise. Councillor Woodcock, I believe that was probably the applicant's mindset when completing that section. What I would recommend to be more fruitful would be cross-referencing, for example, a shape file that details 1, 2, and 3 soils in a GIS system with what applications are being received annually to then understand what has happened on that type of land over the course of the year. Further on in this evening's agenda, we've got an activity report from Development Services that speaks to the number of building permits and applications that have been received. That's something that I think is more appropriate. Don't get me wrong, downloading responsibilities to an applicant and having them complete is great. I also recognize that everyone has a different interpretation. So if council's interpretation, for example, is to understand what has happened on certain classed land or soils, then I think we should be doing it as opposed to members of the community as staff. So that's something that I would say we can do on a go forward basis. Or for example, in trying to bolster our position on a policy set in understanding what, as you can appreciate, the numbers that I'm included in this report are fairly vague. What percentage of those were on class 1 soil versus 2 versus 3? That detail is not there, for example. That's where you could very easily glean that information out of an ArcGIS system when you have the documents in such system. So that would be what I would recommend we do moving forward.
Anything else on this topic before we move on? Okay, so what sort of pops up in my mind is we're looking at expanding the scope of what sort of development we're going to be looking at on agricultural soils or agricultural land classes beyond 1, 2, and 3. There isn't time by the next meeting to come up with a policy that limits development on a wider range of soil classes. And there's a sense that there is a looming crowd of predatory developers waiting to pounce on agricultural land within a few weeks. Whether this is true or not, or even if it's only 1 or 2 developers looking at some land, we need to do something fairly quickly. Looking for a broad scoped approach at this point doesn't mean we can't do that down the road fairly soon, within this year. But we want to do something to maybe nip some imminent development proposals in the bud fairly quickly. So that leaves us with possibly the choice for our planner of simply saying, okay, it's time for an interim control bylaw, because we don't have time to deal with a whole lot of detail here. Or some policy that will at least address the class 1, 2, and 3 lands that are mapped for us. And Jason has some ideas about how to limit development on those lands, and then move on to other types of lands which may be more marginal, but still, as Ed Embury pointed out, important for the viability of existing farms as sources of hay, possibly for cropping with certain types of no-till practices and so on. So I'm just throwing that out to give you the lay of the land. I want council and staff to be thinking about how we can approach this. Council, if you're not satisfied with what our planner brings to us on the 20th, the interim control bylaw option is there, and it can be done just like that. We've done it before. We've done it on recreational development, Doug, in a previous council, and the cannabis situation. No further cannabis until we came up with policy and so on. So those options are available. I will leave it at that. We've got several more items to deal with on our agenda, and thank you for that discussion. 8.3, our treasurer. This is our accounts payable and payroll report. Those of you who are here for all the farming discussion, we don't have too many more items on the agenda. You may find some of them of interest, but you're certainly free to go. I'm not trying to get rid of you, but you've looked at the agenda. If you want to stay for any of the other items, that's great. If you want to, some of you want to depart now, I'll just give you a moment to move on. That wasn't a moment to have little conversations. It was a moment to depart. Yeah. Yeah.
John?
Yeah.
Being one of the farm protectors, I was hoping that an interim bylaw would be, could we put that in tonight? It was
No.
thrown out there.
No, he would have to draw it up and have it in official form. It would have to be legally approvable. We can't just make one up on the spot.
Okay,
Yeah, but if we're going to do that, we'll do that in a couple of weeks.
thank you.
Okay, we'll carry on. Item 3.3.1 is our treasurer's report. This is the January accounts payable payroll. Our recommendation is that council receive the accounts payable and payroll reports for the month of January as prepared by the treasurer. Can I get a mover and seconder for that, please? Sherry and Wendy, any discussion? Yes, Wenda.
Which I wasn't able to open the attachments, Anita. It took me to a really interesting. Did anyone else have that problem?
No, I had no problem.
So this is what I get when I click on it.
Oh, I've seen those before, yeah. You have to
Once I
fill
log
in.
I log in and then nothing, so
Yeah,
I haven't seen those, so I won't be able to comment.
it's just
on
an
that.
IT
Sorry.
glitch, so, yeah.
Okay, tomorrow's fine. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, anyone else? All right, then, all in favor? You can't vote, Wendy.
I know, I haven't seen them.
That's carried, thank you. 8.4, procedural bylaw review. The recommendation is that the report entitled Procedural Bylaw Review be received for information, and further that a committee of the whole meeting be scheduled to allow for further review and discussion applicable to potential procedural bylaw amendments. Can I get a mover and seconder for that, please? Crystal Lee and Rob. Brandy, do you want to address this one?
I can answer any questions if there's anything that wasn't clear within the report.
Any questions for Brandy on this? Yes, Rob, go ahead.
Brandy, I was actually on the committee for the procedural bylaw amendments with our previous CAO. And we went line by line and word by word. It was intense, if Doug recalls. Was it Wenda?
Yeah.
I couldn't remember exactly who their third was, but it was, we went through that. I'm amazed at how many things we missed. Is it
I know.
possible that we didn't miss these things, but they actually weren't done? Is that what we're seeing here?
I can't comment on that.
Brandy wasn't here for those discussions. In any case, there's clearly at least some housekeeping items and some procedural things to look after. Did you have a comment, Crystal Lee? Yes, go ahead.
I welcome this because last year when we did this, I wasn't available at those times and I had some things I'd like to contribute. Including, I just think some of the things you brought up are really great. And I think also just having that new eyes to look at it is a really great opportunity for us and also review. So I'm happy I'll be able to participate this time.
Anything further? Yes, Doug.
I'm just wondering, Brandy, do you want to proceed with the whole committee of the whole, or would you like a smaller committee that can come in and meet with you and do it in a daytime?
I think committee of the whole will be suffice. It'll give each member of council an opportunity to review it and provide their input on it.
Anything further? We have a motion on the floor. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 8.4.2, discharge of firearms. The recommendation is that the report entitled Options to Regulate Hunting and the Discharge of Firearms be received for information, and further that staff be directed to monitor inquiries pertaining to the discharge of firearms and report back to council in early 2025 with a summary of inquiries. Or the alternative motions are that the report be received for information and that council direct staff to conduct community engagement pertaining to the establishment of a bylaw to regulate the discharge of firearms within the township of Stone Mills. Can I get a mover and seconder for one or the other of those options? Sherry. Just use your mic.
I would move the first one.
Is there a seconder for the first one? That's Rob seconds that. Now, do I deal with that one first, or do I ask if anyone wants to make the second option?
You can call the question on that, and if it's not supported, then you can review the second option.
Of course, right. All in favor? That one is carried. Thank you. Manager of Public Works and Emergency Services, there's nothing under that. 8.6 is Chief Building Official Detler, an update on development services activity. The recommendation is that council receive the report entitled Township of Stone Mills 2023 Development Services Activity Report for information. Mr. Detler, the floor is yours.
Yes, kind of a timely report on development, which in some cases is not being cheered on by the sounds of things. Yeah, but thank you, Reeve Wise. And this is actually obligatory. The Building Code Act, the Building Code actually makes me do an annual report in the 2 months after each fiscal year. And this is a report that basically states that we had a pretty good year again, monetarily last year. Just want to state some of the crowd behind me. I'm just a son of a farmer that just kind of meandered into building inspection, and I'm not really maybe the enemy that maybe some people think I am. Anyways, I just issued the permits. I didn't make the rules. So. One of the things that I'm kind of an elder statesman in this municipality. There isn't many people that have been around this long. One of the things that I keep hearing in the delegations tonight was that the PA just kind of disappeared like poof, like 20 years ago when 5 guys went and took a ride. When I started here in 2013, we were still enforcing, and I was still writing zoning compliance letters and enforcing the 2000 zoning bylaw. And this municipality was still covered in prime agricultural zoning up until the summer of 2014, when our current zoning bylaw 2014-744 was passed. And I actually had a ton of problems dating back. I remember basically going to empty meetings and having a ton of problems with that zoning bylaw, that new zoning bylaw. And unfortunately, I can state that soil classifications weren't one of them, but yeah, that's when Moscow became an island of PA, and that everything went poof. And that was the one thing that I keep hearing in this in these meetings today. And I just wanted to state that's not correct. I've got multiple copies of the 2000 zoning bylaw that members of the public can look at, and it still had a ton of PA in it up until 2014 when it was repealed.
Did you want to go through any of the, just for the sake of the people in attendance, Jake, some of the stats that you brought into your report here for 2023? Because I think they're quite interesting.
Yeah, so 40 new dwellings, which would be up from where it used to be, 2015. I've been here long enough. I'm starting to get, obviously we kind of 2022 with 59 new dwellings was probably the peak of what we're going to see. We may never see that again in terms of development. But it would be normal to have 20 or 25 in years past, or even less. One of the things that the numbers keep going up, because obviously the construction value of building a house keeps going up each year, and that's really what's driving. For folks who don't know, Goodyear is doing an expansion, and the 2023 numbers being so well is largely a result of several permits issued, conditional permits issued to Goodyear of Canada. And really, that's what made the year so great.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Detler? So have all the building permits been issued for the Goodyear expansion, Jake, or where are we at with that?
No, only conditional permits have been issued until the site plan control bylaw is passed by Stone Mills Township and Greater Napanee. Napanee nor Stone Mills Township can issue the permits, the final like permits for everything. And so, yes, there's plenty more permits to still be issued on that front.
And how, with an industrial expansion like that, do you apply the same formula for a building permit fee that you would to a regular house construction, or is there any differentiation there?
Yeah, great question, Reeve Wise. Most municipalities have a sliding scale where the percentage that you're being charged per $1,000 to a homeowner who's building, you know, a home down the street is actually, in most municipalities, it gets less. If you looked at Napanee or Loyalist bylaw, you're going to find that if you go over, if a project goes over $5 million, goes over $50 million, goes over $100 million, then the percentage keeps going down. And in this municipality, to be honest with you, I wrote the building bylaw several years ago. I never really anticipated that there would be a project in excess of many tens of millions of dollars, which would land on my desk. And unfortunately, we'll say for Goodyear, they're going to be charged the same percentage that anyone in Stone Mills Township building a house would be charged.
Thanks, Jake. Any further comments or questions for Jake at this point? We have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Yes. Oh, I failed to get a mover and seconder for that one. Jerry and Doug. Thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Jake. Committee board reports and minutes. I have nothing. Crystal Lee, did you have anything from Quinte Conservation that you wanted to mention at this point? Or?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
The biggest news is that John is no longer with Quinte Conservation. They said their records didn't go back far enough. They don't know when he joined, but it's about 3 decades. And I'm glad I was ignorant enough to not know that full length of service when I asked you a year ago if you were still interested. The answer would have been pretty obvious. So just want to congratulate John on stepping down from that and giving me the opportunity. Just the only real change, as you may know, is just that the memorandum of understanding with the 18 municipalities has been submitted to MNR, and I'm going to get my full orientation as a new board member tomorrow. That's about as much as I can say.
That's good. I didn't know that was coming up. That'll be very interesting for you, I think. Thanks, Crystal Lee. Anyone else? Check the Rosetta Stone. It should be there. Okay, we've got nothing under items for consideration or information. New business and statements from members. Anyone want to bring anything forward here? Wenda, did you have something? Mike Wenda.
Oh, I was wanting to talk to Jeff about the sidewalk clearance. I know we had a little chat about that a couple of weeks ago, but then I also had another person in Tamworth commenting on it, that a few weeks ago they were having a hard time maneuvering.
On a sidewalk?
Yes.
They're all clear now.
That's kind of a non-issue. Did you see a hiccup in the what was going on though with the road crew? Like, were we down any vehicles or? Okay. Okay, good.
The sidewalk in Newburgh that we have on the sidewalk is the big boulevard. But the one in Tamworth that didn't hear that.
I think that was the only question I had.
Okay, anyone else? Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, just as some of you may or may not be aware, January was Alzheimer's Awareness Month. This topic came up recently when I was speaking with a friend who's probably watching right now. And she's a Stone Mills Township alumni. And she works for the Alzheimer's Society. So we were having a chat about that. And in the conversation, I discussed the possibility of having a representative from the society come to the township and offer a caregiver support group I thought it would be beneficial for our residents, and that would be free and open to the public. It'd be a fantastic opportunity for township residents who are currently experiencing, or may experience in the future, dementia, and discuss the best practices in managing the difficult times, as well as understanding what support's out there. I'd like to see 3 of these events if possible, because some people can't attend or may not hear about it till 2nd or 3rd, in strategic locations in the township to allow for wider participation. So I'm currently in discussion with the society, and the Friends Meeting House in Moscow has generously offered their venue to start the first one in February, which I thought was great. In support of these group information sessions, I was going to request the following. Permission to use the multi-purpose room in Stone Mills Rec Center at some point, late spring or early summer. A date to be determined, because we got to kind of get the first one under us. Permission to use the Newburgh Community Hall for fall, for the 3rd session, so we can spread them around the township and have them at different points throughout the year. Give a bit of traction to it, and modest light refreshments. I'm thinking Timbits, coffee, tea, and water. Just something nice. And broadcasting of these group sessions on our social media and the website. When I campaigned for this chair, I thought it would be nice if we brought some simple, straightforward community services to Stone Mills Township, and this is one of the initiatives I'd like to complete, and I think it's a great opportunity for everybody. I gave Brandy a copy of this, so if I don't know how you want me to do that.
Yeah, go ahead, Brandy.
I can formulate that into a motion for council consideration. So that council directs staff to work with the Alzheimer's Society to arrange caregiver support groups within the township of Stone Mills that would be free and open to the public, and further that this be included within the 2024 budget deliberations.
That's great. And with that, I'm more than happy to make most of the arrangements to save staff time and effort.
So you're making that motion now as Brandy has read it. Is there a seconder for that? Wenda? So in terms of the hall use, isn't that just a matter of booking the halls?
That would be it. I would work with Jake or whoever, and Al, probably. I'm thinking with the rec center be Al, correct? Oh, we just do it front. Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
When it comes to the rec center side, and I'll look after that sort of thing after we get the first one down. The first one doesn't involve any assistance from the township at all. They just offered, which I thought was great, except for the refreshments, which I wanted to make sure that I threw that out there and put it out there for everybody. If it does happen, this is a great thing for all of us.
Wenda?
Are you interested in any collaboration? Because I know Newburgh is putting together a panel of experts to speak to the public on vulnerable sector. One of them was Alzheimer's and dementia. Children, homeless, at-risk adults. There was a whole spectrum of experts that they were planning to bring in for a panel discussion to be shared with the public on resources and all that kind of thing. So I can give you the name of the, he wouldn't be a facilitator, they're looking for a facilitator. But I can give you the name of the person who brought that forward.
I think that's fantastic. It makes me glad that I brought it up when I did, because that would be just wonderful.
Yeah.
I was asked to help out with a friend of mine who got early onset dementia. It would kind of brought the conversation up, and then I thought, this is one of these things I've been wanting to do. So what perfect timing. So yes, we'll speak after.
Okay, any more discussion on this motion? So just for my clarification, so you can book the halls, and you're also looking for the township to fund refreshments at some point? So this might be a policy thing that we have to look at. Is this a precedent? Are we going to start? And I'm not begrudging a few dollars here, Rob, just in terms of policy. Are we going to be looking to the township to fund refreshments or other sort of amenities for a variety of volunteer groups, or what are we looking at here? That's just kind of maybe a cynical question, but I think we have to talk about it.
Not cynical at all. In fact, that's what I was looking to your guidance for. As a new counselor, I wasn't even aware exactly how I'd approach this. So that sounds like new business area. Let's have a discussion and you guide me as to what you think the best ways to go about it, and I'll rely on your experience.
Doug?
Yeah, it's been in the past, we've routinely volunteered the use of halls for certain groups and that, and absorbed the cost of it. But I don't think we've ever been into a situation other than township-related functions where we've expanded funds for refreshments. Not that I can remember anyways. You know, we could set a very small limit on it as long as it's reasonable, you know.
It probably, oh, sorry, Wendy, do you want to, no, I'm the last to speak, so although sometimes you may doubt that. You go ahead.
Well, just in my experience, I know dealing with a lot of different seniors, there's a lot of different requirements. Like there's no sugar, so it's not just cookies and a coffee. The staff would be involved with, you know, a dozen of these and only 2 of those. So you have to be kind of careful when you're dealing with different age groups and the numbers. Is it 20 or is it 5 people? Could probably manage a lot easier, but if it's 20 people, it would be a little more difficult. Just some thoughts on food. Got to be careful with the food and the drinks.
Anyone else? So I would suggest, Jason has just sort of mentioned to me, we do have a donation section in our budget. Can we leave this discussion for the donation section? We get the facilities booked and so on, and maybe look at a discussion about policy around donations, which have generally been for like a sports group or something like that. You know, the sort of thing we've been involved in.
Absolutely. I fully understand. I guess what it was when I was on the campaign trail, the number one thing I heard, other than, well, no, the number one thing I heard was taxes are high, services are too low. And when we were doing the all candidates meetings, I thought, you know, we have these venues, we have services out there that are willing to come and speak and help for free. All we got to do is just throw some Timbits and some coffee and tea out there. Everybody get together and learn something about how they can help families. So I thought I'd try that, and that's cool. I understand what you're saying. I didn't realize that the coffee and the Timbits would be the concern. But I also understand the circumstances. If we need to omit the Timbit coffee part, I'm okay with that. We'll figure another way. But I thought it would be a really good opportunity for us as the township to give back a little bit. And I'm going to pursue more activities like that in the future. I just think it's a wonderful thing for us to do that. Get these people together and say, wow, they're throwing us something we can participate in to find out how we can look after our own. That's all I'm after.
Yeah, no argument there at all. So could we just amend the motion at this point then to involve booking the halls and to discuss our donation policy as regards refreshments for groups at budget time? Is that
BYOTB?
Okay. All in favor then? That's carried. Thanks, Rob. Anyone else? Statements from members, new business? Nothing at this time. In that case, I have to ask the public to depart because we have to have a closed meeting to deal with the approval of minutes from a previous closed session and personal matters about an identifiable individual regarding staffing recruitment and negotiations to be carried on by the municipality regarding 52 Concession Street, Tamworth, and litigation or potential litigation. So thank you very much for attending. It's nice to see good attendance at a council meeting. Thanks for coming, everybody. So I'll entertain a motion to enter into closed session. Can I get a mover and seconder? Stop watching the people leaving. Pay attention to me. Sherry and Doug, all in favor? That's carried. We'll take 5 before we actually enter officially into closed session. We need to cut the broadcast at this point. Thank you, Randy.
Oh.